Joining us today is Ed Vincent. From throwing New Year's parties and building film festivals to creating SaaS platforms, his latest chapter is FestivalPass, a new way to connect through live events. Ed, thanks so much for being here. Excited to chat.
Happy to be here.
You've been in investment banking, e-commerce, SaaS, and now in the live event space.
Sure.
I'm curious, has there been like a silver lining or like a thread that you can identify that has kind of pieced all these different careers, different jobs together?
Yeah, very much so. And even what we're doing today, and we can get to it, really comes back from a whole history of the evolution of what I've done. As you mentioned, I was an investment banker. I was a finance major in college. When I left college, I was working in corporate valuation. So it's as silly as even to go back a little further, I've been an entrepreneur forever. And even in my college dorm room, I was a real estate appraiser. So I was valuing homes. It was a great job during the real estate appraisal timeframe because I had pure independence and was making good money for a kid in college. I was the only kid with a laptop and a fax machine in the entire college. This was back in 1995, 94 maybe. But anyway, following that, I went into corporate valuation. And then when I was in corporate valuation, I would always be valuing companies because I started valuing real estate and then I would be valuing companies. And it was always pre and post the deal. It was like, okay, well, the deal is in the process of happening. I'll value the company before you buy it, or I'll value it afterwards and do what they call a purchase price allocation for IP rights and everything like that. But I wanted to be part of the deal. So I was like, well, shit, I got to actually go to investment banking itself. So I went over to banking and was there for a few years. But I still had this entrepreneurial bug. I've always been an entrepreneur. So in the world of Internet 1.0, I decided that, hey, it's time for me to go start my own company. And a lot of that happened because a buddy of mine, a guy named Pat, we would throw these big New Year's parties in New York City. So we'd have 1,000 people parties, and we would always end up running from corner to corner in New York City to collect cash. And eventually the internet said you could actually put a buy link somewhere on a website and people could actually pay through credit cards and make it really easy. So I was like, wow, this is fascinating. Like, this internet thing's cool. So immediately I wanted to start an e-commerce like company. And because I was always about city-based experiences and things that were a lot of fun, my first company was called City Stuff, and we sold things that made cities famous. So I left banking in 1999, and with my friend Pat, we started City Stuff. So if anybody is from New York City or knows it, we would sell Junior's cheesecake shipped overnight, H&H bagels shipped overnight, flash frozen pizza shipped overnight, and we had, hundreds of vendors in cities all over the US selling the really cool food and fashion and things that made cities famous. Fast forward a little bit, we ended up selling that company in 2001. We were acquired by an e-commerce company based in Stamford, Connecticut. And there are interesting things about each step along the way, but I'll speed through the process and please come back to any of it. But after selling that company, spent about maybe a year or less working for that company after they were purchased, and then 9/11 happened. And I was like, well, I'm sitting here, a young kid in New York City, living in the meatpacking district, commuting via car or train up to Stamford, Connecticut every day. And then after 9/11, I was like, well, this isn't a good thing. Like, I don't want to keep doing this. So I left to start my second company, which was an experiential marketing firm. So we would bring a lot of major brands into major live events. Those events could be festivals themselves. They could be just activations on the streets in New York, but we had about a 70-person team. We eventually built it to a 70-person team headquartered in Chelsea, New York, and would activate all these brands. We helped launch the Vail Film Festival in Vail, Colorado. We worked with the Sonoma Valley Film Festival. We even owned a film festival in the Dominican Republic. So it was really then where I started falling in love with live events. And it was those live experiences that were really special. So during that time, we even built a hotel in the Dominican Republic with Maxim magazine, if anybody is old enough to remember when magazines were important. And it was called the Maxim Bungalows in Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. And that was a lot of fun. So during that time, I really enjoyed it, but it was more of a service-based business. And I wanted to get back into software. So I decided to create a B2B SaaS business. So this was the one thing that was kind of like outside of entertainment for my history. But I learned a lot about, understanding subscription business models. So this is, again, part of this weaving of where we are today. It was a B2B SaaS business in the franchise and multi-unit space called Simply Engage. And it was a software product for like companies that had, 100 different stores, and they were able to integrate email marketing, social media posting, and kind of website building all in one. This was kind of before HubSpot even existed. But anyway, built that company, ended up selling it or really merging it with a portfolio company of one of our investors. It was an Italian mobile company called Motomoto, and that was in 2014. And then I started a data and analytics company called Predict Analytics in the TV and film space, so back to entertainment. And that was, again, a service business. So I went from, banking to software to service to software, now to service again. And it was a great, exciting time. So a lot of big clients like A&E Networks. We built their initial audience intelligence platform so they can understand their consumers. It was at a time back in 2015, 2016, where Netflix was really coming about, and they were starting to change the way consumers individually were connected to. So not only were people creating shows, but they also were distributing the content. Whereas like the A&Es of the world back then, their only distribution outlet was through cable channels, and they didn't own the customer. So we were helping them get to know the customer. So we did that for A&E Networks. We did it for AMC Networks. You probably remember their shows like Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, all clients of ours. Lots of big film studios were clients of ours. And then we started kind of doing things in the movie ticketing space. There was a client of ours called movietickets.com, which still exists today. It got bought by Fandango, which was interesting to really understand the kind of ticketing space around entertainment. Another client was ones where we would predict who would be sitting in the seats in movie theaters. There was this air gap between who bought the ticket and who actually sat in the seat. And when they run advertising in front of the movie theater in the US, it's usually like the first 20 minutes of a movie. They wanted to know who was sitting in the seat, so they would use our technology to predict that. And then there was this infamous company, and this kind of bridges the gap into FestivalPass. There was this infamous company in the States called MoviePass. A lot of people heard of MoviePass. It was one of those companies that kind of came out of nowhere. They were selling $10 for as many movies as you wanted to go to in a movie theater every month. So it was a ridiculous deal for consumers. But their CEO knew that I and my company were kind of the premier folks in consumer data for TV and film. So he asked me to come help them. They were starting to grow rapidly. I think I joined them. I didn't join them directly. They hired my company when they were at about 1 million subscribers, and then they continued on to about 4 million subscribers. But I was their de facto chief data officer for about 18 months. So what I learned was a lot about how data can really help understand the consumer side of entertainment and the ability to predict certain aspects of it. A couple of problems that MoviePass had and why they eventually kind of went bankrupt was two things. Is a lot of people never understood if their business model was sustainable, which it was not. However, it was a very fixable business model. And that's one of the key things. People think they went out of business because they were basically charging $10 and people can go to movies and they were paying for those movies and subsidizing it. That's part of it, but there was a lot of ways they could have fixed the business model. The bigger problem was the way they were owned. They were owned by a publicly traded holding company, and that holding company had a CEO that was making money, raising money. So it was this whole conflict of interest. So he wanted to keep he didn't care that they were losing tens of millions of dollars a month, because as long as subscription was growing, he could go raise money on the capital markets. And that was a big conflict of interest for the sustainability of a company. And that's ultimately what put the nail in the coffin for them. But I learned a ton while I was there, and I learned what you should do and what you should not do. They had a great product market fit, but they just didn't operate the right way. And around that time, there was a lot of really great other companies that were starting to figure out how to make the subscription model work. One of those companies is called ClassPass. I don't know I think you guys are Canadian or whatever, but I don't know if they are in Canada, but I don't know if you remember them well. But they've been around since about 2012, and they had a lot of the same problems MoviePass did early on. So they were trying to figure out, well, how do I do unlimited, classes for a certain price? How do I do X amount of classes for a certain price? And none of it really worked, right? They could never really figure out their cost of goods sold, and that was a big problem scaling a business. until about 2017, 2018. And this is around the time I was at MoviePass, and I knew some folks over at ClassPass building this model, which was they installed a credit-based currency. And what that really meant was customers would pay a flat fee, whether that's $30, $50, $80 a month, and they receive credits. And then they can redeem those credits for specific classes that they wanted to go to. What that allowed for was now people could choose to use the credits however they chose to use them. So if they wanted a high demand class with the best teacher at 8 a.m., they might pay 8 credits or 10 credits, but if they wanted, an empty spin class at 2 in the afternoon, it might be 2 credits. So they got to choose how to use it, and that really created dynamic pricing within the actual inventory. When you have that, you're able to then figure out how to be gross margin positive on every transaction. So once they figured out that, they knew their cost of goods sold, they knew they were quote unquote profitable is probably the wrong word, but gross margin positive every time somebody went to a class. And that enabled them to grow to 100 countries, and they eventually sold for a couple $2 billion to MindBody. They're still operated today under that. The reason I bring that up is because the model actually works, and they still operate today under that same model. And there's many, many other examples of credit-based currencies that work. Some, mostly it's to build these dynamically priced inventory for a flat monthly fee. So I started thinking, how can I take a model that does work and apply it to an industry I'm very passionate about, right? So 10 years of an experiential marketing company, fell in love with live events. I really believe that live experiences are the heart and soul of humans. It allows them to connect. Nobody I know, and especially next gen consumers, millennials, Gen Zs, like their entire life is spent about how can I find ways to connect with others around my passions, whether that's through travel, whether that's through concerts, whether that's through sporting events. And it's something I really wanted to participate in. So in the big picture, what was happening is this industry that I was looking at doing something in, I realized how massive it is. Like even in the film business, like in the US, there's about $10, $12 billion a year in movie transactions of people going to the theater. But in the live event business on a global basis, it's 200 billion. So it's a massive business across music and sports and comedy and theater. And I was like, wow, that's a huge, huge opportunity. And more so than it being large, there's a lot of consumer friction. It was an industry that still is today, and we're trying to solve this, is that people really don't like where they secure their tickets from when they go to an event. There's the primary guys, and I won't name names because we want to work with a lot of them and all of them. But at the end of the day, some of the primary ticketers, they have some of their own problems with forcing different artists to use their ticketing services in order to use their certain venues, et cetera, et cetera. But even a bigger problem is in the secondary industry. So people have heard of things like StubHub or SeatGeek or Vivid Seats. And a lot of those big businesses get very frustrating for the consumer because they'll go to them, they think they're paying $200 for a ticket, they'll put the credit card in, and then when they check out, it's like, oh, there's another $50, $70 in fees on top of it. So there's a big friction with the consumer, and they're saying, well, I don't understand, what are these fees for? So we wanted to solve something that was a community-driven shared ownership concept where people can come together and share experiences with others that they have similar passions about and do so in a way that saves them money, rewards them for engaging in it, and isn't transactional like a lot of these other ticketing services. And there's a lot to it. I can get into more of the business model, but that was kind of my long-winded way of sharing the journey of why everything I've done in the past has kind of matched into what we're doing today. And the last kind of connection I'll make is all that time spent in finance and investment banking has helped me figure out a really interesting model, which we were briefly talking about earlier, which is being able to forecast how this type of business can still reward the customer, but still be profitable for the business. And we have this really unique thing called the lifetime pass, where people can pay once and receive $1,200 worth of credits to spend on the platform the first year, and then every single year thereafter, they get refreshed and can spend another $1,200 and another $1,200. So it was a unique way using kind of my understanding of finance and forecasting of how we can build a sustainable model around that feature that really excites people and gets them on board to be part of this membership.
Yeah, I'm mind blown at all the connections. Not because I couldn't foresee that coming, but the fact that often people get bored, like not to simplify, but people, it's just somebody starts something, they exit or it fails or whatever, and they move on to the next and they take a couple learnings. But it seems like your journey has been the thread is deep in everything that you've done.
Correct.
There's so many things that I want to dive into there, but the first thing that I find really fascinating is that you've identified the importance of knowing your customer, and the data behind it, and knowing who's filling those seats, to talk about the movie theater example, et cetera. A lot of people don't, I think, or maybe it comes as an afterthought. It's like product first and then knowing who's actually purchasing.
Sure.
When did you first realize that knowing the customer is integral to the success of the business?
Yeah, and going back to some of those experiences, it's what we began to do for A&E Networks, and that was kind of the key, what we did for a lot of our business. And then even on the MoviePass side, what I found was fascinating was they had the best data set in all of film. So better than any studio, better than any exhibitor. Exhibitor means movie theater, because they had a statistical representation of the entire country. Whereas like Sony Studios or Paramount Studios only knew Paramount or Sony or Disney, whereas AMC theaters only knew AMC, Regal only knew Regal, and MoviePass actually can see and understand that, hey, millions of people are going to these movies in these cities at, this time, watching this specific genre. And it was really fascinating to realize how powerful that is. So the answer for us now is it's important because we're cross-genre as well. So when people are coming to FestivalPass and joining, they're committing to a subscription. And when they're committing to a subscription, and there's another piece to all this, I can share why it becomes sticky, because when somebody joins, they have now a bank account on the platform, but they continue to buy all their tickets through us rather than, one-off. Whereas for those other businesses, they might go to Ticketmaster one day, they might go to AXS another day, they might go to eTix another day, So here we're actually seeing all the transactions for our customers and be able to, when we can see that, we fully understand and know their interests. So one of the cool things that we're doing now is when somebody signs up, it's a very social concept. We got to do more to make them engage with each other, but everybody gets a public profile. So, you sign up, you're a member, and as a member, you tell us, okay, I like this band, I like Beyonce, I like Taylor Swift, I like Chris Stapleton. You pick your band. And now I know that about you because you've told us you like that. And then all of a sudden I see the tickets you're actually buying. And it says, oh, you've gone to this event, you've gone to this event, you've booked this hotel. So now I have this information because not only have you done that, you've told us some of it, that's self-reported data. And then you've actually purchased tickets, which is behavioral data. And now I know the relevance of this to you. And you can now also connect with other people on our platform that also like Chris Stapleton or Taylor Swift or the New York Giants or the Knicks or whoever. And now you're connected to hundreds of other, maybe thousands or tens of thousands of other people that share your passions. And that creates a social fabric for us to understand, how can we make this better for you? How can we recommend the best experience for you? And there's a lot of things we're excited about over time using that data, especially with AI that we're building. And I'll pause there because I'm sure you want to ask about AI in more detail later.
Definitely, we will. We'll get there, absolutely. That's really fascinating about the social piece. I didn't actually realize that. So are you saying like within the platform, you can actually like connect with friends or potentially new people and converse with them on the platform itself to potentially meet up with new people that share, as we were talking about community before, and build community within?
Yeah, so it's the online offline concept. So absolutely, like here in Austin, we get a lot of members buying tickets to UT football games. That's like our professional sport in Austin. So, a lot of people will go on and they'll connect with others that like UT football, and they'll be like, hey, I'm going to this tailgate. You want to join us? I'm going to this. You want to join us? So it's exciting to allow people to connect with others that share their passions, and now they can meet up offline.
Yeah, awesome. You talked about, or I'm curious in exploring the fact that, realistically, we've chatted about MoviePass and ClassPass as examples of this kind of newer model, but realistically, you're changing consumer behavior in this ticketing, I suppose, world.
Yep.
What have been some of the frictions or the things that, have maybe proved a little bit more complicated in selling the consumer on this new way of doing things? Because as you mentioned, there's always been the complications around ticketing and that sort of thing, or frictions around those things. But there could be equivalent amount of frictions of people just like the unknown, that they don't know what this model looks like.
Sure. Yeah. And a lot of it, I think, is it's an interesting thing that where it gets easier as we go forward. It's always hard in any kind of new introduction of a new model. Luckily, the ClassPasses of the world pre-existed us, so there's already many, many millions of people that understand how it works in general. So when people see it and like they hear, oh, this is just like ClassPass for live experiences, at least it clicks, right? So at least it's not foreign to them. And of course, we do a lot of how it works on the site where you can like actually see how it works. And but you're right, there's a level of trust and a level of complexity that people need to be educated on. But what I have found is as we keep going forward, a lot of our new members, of course, we're doing some marketing and things that go with it, but a lot of it is word of mouth. So it's our people that are members, especially lifetime members, they go tell their friends like how awesome this is and how they, have had it for a year or 2 years or 3 years and they've gotten all this going to dozens of events. So their friends are like, oh, okay, well, I trust my friend. He's done it. He spent the money and now he's got all this value back. And I think that's what's really going to create the flywheel is when, friends tell you, yeah, I use it and it's great. I save a ton of money. I'm getting rewarded. I've met a bunch of other people on it. And that's really the key.
We were chatting a little bit before we started recording, and I'd like to kind of revisit that conversation about the economics of a lifetime pass.
Sure.
There's businesses that just simply would never work for, because if you anticipate that somebody's going to spend, all of their credits in your case, you'd be out of business real quick.
Sure.
So talk to me about like kind of the research that you've done about what the average consumer does year over year and what that looks like.
Yeah. So the first thing to make sure it's clear is that the lifetime pass is very limited, right? So when you look at the overall business model, and we see ourselves in 3, 4, 5 years, we'll have millions of members on the platform, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands that are monthly and annual members. The lifetime pass we look at as both a go-to-market, a 10,000 super fan kind of play, and a way to reward people for adopting it early. So kind of what I shared earlier is once you have thousands of people on the platform, and we have sold many, many, many hundreds of these lifetime passes already, people get used to it and they start understanding and telling their friends. So it's really, part of it is a marketing thing to reward people early, but we still have figured out how to make sure the company doesn't lose money on it. And that's your core question. So the way it works now is if somebody buys the lifetime pass, the current purchase price as during this filming is $3,000. So if they pay $3,000 today, they immediately receive $1,200 worth of credits. They can then use those credits for the next 12 months. And then on the anniversary of when they bought it, they get refreshed with another $1,200 worth of credits they can spend. And every year in perpetuity going forward, they get another $1,200. So for the consumer, in less than 3 years, they've gotten all their value back and all their money back. So anything after that is effectively free, right? So now they're going to shows free in year 2.5, year 3, year 4, year 5. So the question is, well, how is that sustainable for the company? The reality is two things happen. Is the $3,000 price that we're talking about now continues to rise. So those who are lucky enough, when we started, we were selling it for a little over $2,000. So there's members that paid $2,000, $2,200, and they're excited now because everybody's paying $3,000. But every few weeks, the price goes up by about $50. So pretty soon it will be $3,200, $3,500, $4,000, and the price will keep going up until it reaches $6,000. The reason why that's actually, it's exciting for those who get in now, but it's also valuable. Even when you're paying $6,000, it's still very valuable. And the reason it is because not only are you getting your $1,200 of credits every year, you're also getting access to really unique things. For example, we already have a partnership with one of the most iconic guitar companies called CF Martin Guitar. And if somebody buys a lifetime pass today, they immediately get access to Martin's backstage, which, Martin does these unique things. Well, they'll do like an acoustic show with Eric Clapton or, a show with Billy Strings. And, our members now have access. Of course, it's kind of a lottery to get into those, but you have to be a backstage member before you can even have a chance. So that's a benefit. And we're going to be adding a ton of really unique benefits. We're going to be starting a whole kind of local series called FB Confidential, where there's really awesome, unique bands playing for only like 100 people. And of course, our lifetime pass holders are the ones that get first dibs on all that. So there's all these benefits. But financially, what's interesting is as that price goes up, we'll sell all 10,000 of our passes in total, and that's all we're ever going to sell for about an average of $4,000, $4,500. So what that does from a business perspective is we'll get all that money up front. So effectively, we'll have $40 million in the bank account up front, which will allow us to invest that money over time. So even on the conservative side, if we're investing at 5% or 10% interest over time, we're able to continue to earn money on the total money and then be able to fund tickets for the individual lifetime pass holders in perpetuity going forward. The also thing that does happen is just human nature, right? From a analytic and statistical perspective, and we'll see where it goes, but generally it's a classic bell curve of how people use and spend on the platform. There's usually that classic 20% that will use every single dollar that they're allowed to use, and we encourage them to do that. There's nothing wrong with it. That's their right. If they find the shows they want to go to and they use it all, fantastic. And then there's some people that see this as an investment. They're like, wow, I can pay $3,000 now, and within a year, it's going to likely be worth $6,000. Why not? I'm going to make that investment. And the reason why it's cool is because it's transferable. So we allow the pass to be sold to other people in the future because it's a digital asset. So it is like buying it. It is a token on the blockchain. So it's an Ethereum token. So some of those 20% buy it because they think this is a really great investment. This is really interesting. It could double my money in a year. And they may or may not use it a lot, right? I've even had a bunch of people buy it saying, well, this is cool. I can eventually transfer it to my kids who are now 16, but eventually when they go to college, I want to give it to them, but I want to pay it for now. I might, as a parent, not use it that much in year 1 or year 2, but when I transfer it, my kid's going to use it. So there's all these things that happen in terms of human psychology. And then, in the world of gift cards, there's the leakage, or you want to call it spillage, or whatever word you want to use. People will use it, and maybe they'll go to a bunch of shows in a current year, and maybe they'll use $900 of the 12. But then it just refreshes the next year and they got their 12 again. So it's not a big deal that that $300 wasn't used. They were traveling, they didn't have time to use it. It's just not a big deal. So in the big picture, we have forecasted that we can supply tickets and hotels, because we can book hotels on our site as well, for our 10,000 lifetime members for at least 10 years. And after that, it will just become a marketing cost to the business. So we're in a good financial position to continue to serve them for a decade. And then it's a marketing cost. And by that time, we'll have millions of members on our platform, hundreds of thousands of monthly and annual members. So it just really becomes this thing that I got in at the time I got in. A lot of people compare it to the American Airlines, lifetime pass to be able to travel as much as, or fly as much as you want. And it's funny because a lot of people always refer to the, 1 or 2, unique circumstances where somebody 30 years later is still flying on it. They eventually discontinued it many, many years later. And, they paid $250,000 initially and they got millions of dollars worth of flights, but they forget the compounding concept of the $250 they paid in 1980 would be worth 1.5 today. And yes, maybe they got 2x value in their flights. But there's also 90% of those other users that loved it for a few years and it just kind of trailed off. So it's a positive thing. The economics works for the user. The economics works for us. It builds a 10,000 super fan base of people that want to talk about us and tell everybody. And it will really, once they sell out, they just won't be available anymore, except for in the secondary market. And hopefully people then see how exciting the platform is, and they just buy they buy a monthly or an annual pass.
I love the likening to the American Airlines because It's so interesting. Like, I mean, people forget, right? Like even when we were chatting about it, I was like, how does that economics make sense? As after you describe it, it makes perfect sense, right? The upfront
Yep.
capital, the bell curve of user base and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's awesome. Um, I want to double click on the digital asset thing. I think it's
Sure.
really interesting that you've gone that route. And you know, I think it's a very unknown space, and I think it's interesting. I guess my question might be: was it strategic to not lead with the fact that it is that? You know what I mean? Lead that based on the scams and that sort of thing
Yes.
that happen in the space. Obviously, you and I that know the technology, and we can discuss that.
Sure.
But I think it's really interesting that that technology is super valuable, and the transferability, I suppose, with that digital asset in the future.
Sure.
Why did you choose to use that technology, and why did you choose, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but not to lead with the fact that that is a huge benefit?
Yeah, part of it is, I think you nailed it, is about 4 years ago when there was a previous bull market in the world of crypto. The NFT craze came about, and that's honestly when we started thinking about this concept. So it was great to give us the perspective of how can we build something that is a lifetime pass effectively and use the blockchain to do so. Um, when we first launched it or even ideated it, it was definitely an NFT. But we realized over time it was very different than the traditional NFT. So without getting too deep, and I don't know if your audience gets into all this, but you know, the generative NFTs or even art-driven NFTs were always driven by the uniqueness of the art, but there wasn't much utility, right? And from day one, there's a massive utility to this token. So meaning that, you know, if nothing else, you're getting $1,200 a year of access to, you know, the best concerts and hotels you can ever imagine. That's there's an inherent value no matter what. The concept of it, the dirtying of the word NFT only being associated with things that had no underlying inherent value or utility kind of hurt the general public market's ability to see the value. And using the blockchain technology, there's so many advantages. So we just chose to lean into it simply being a lifetime pass that was transferable, resellable, and you own it. And it's the whole idea of ownership. So when I look at like what the dream for what we're building is, I really, really want people to feel ownership in the platform, to feel that, hey, this is a platform built for us. It's not, you know, some of those companies out there that are just like trying to nail you for every fee and transaction. I really want people to be part of this community. I want to be millions of people throughout the world that are all connected through the fabric of FestivalPass, where they're sharing their passions, and they should own a part of it, whether they own it in the form of the pass or in the future, whether they own it in the form of, you know, a small piece of equity in the company that we may even tokenize in the future.
I love that you're bringing everything back to community and the user, right? That's integral. It's clear that all the decisions that you're being made so far are with that in mind.
Yep.
Which brings me to partnerships. Well, you touched on partnerships, and I'm really curious because partnerships are typically one of those things that they can go wrong pretty quick if both parties, in fact, in this case, maybe all three parties, so your consumer, yourself, your business, the partner, the vendor, or whatever the case may be, and the users. It has to be mutually beneficial.
Sure.
So how are you approaching these partnerships? What makes a partnership with a venue, a ticketing platform, et cetera, useful for both parties?
Sure. And specifically if you're referring to inventory versus just marketing partnerships like the CF Martin one,
Right.
or others. But if you're talking about inventory, so what's interesting is both in the travel space as well as the ticketing space, we're kind of tapping into pre-existing infrastructure that allows us to gain access to inventory. So I'll tap on the hotel side first because it's similar. Most people that don't think about it don't really know, right? So if you're a hotel and you of course have your website and you sell directly, there's many different places where you can book a hotel room across the Expedias of the world or any kind of booking platform. And the reason that the hotels use all those platforms is distribution, right? So it's a way where they don't have to pay direct marketing dollars in order to drive everybody to their website in order to buy that hotel room. So there's been a wholesale business in travel for decades. And what that does is it creates mass distribution. So the hotel is happy to give a discounted wholesale price. And this happens in fashion and everywhere else, is if you're not the front end retailer, you're the wholesaler. So they're happy to give a discounted price as long as somebody else is bringing the customer. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's where the benefit happens, right? So we're just one other avenue of distribution for the hotel community where somebody can find and book the room. They book it on our site. They didn't have to market to this person. All they now have is a booking. Same thing goes in ticketing. Is that it's a guaranteed distribution mechanism to bring a consumer to buy that specific ticket to a show or a sporting event or whatever it is, where they're not spending media dollars in hopes to convince somebody to go to that specific show. So there is a positive concept of us being that distributor and bringing the customer without any additional marketing dollars to them. So they're happy to give it to, for a lower price because they're saving money on marketing. It's an interesting concept within the world of tickets because there's the primary ticketing and secondary ticketing. And also we have a little more leverage as we grow. So as we get into having millions of members on the platform, this is what I always like to tell the members is tell everybody, because as soon as we grow, the faster we grow and the more members we have, the better deals we can get for you, right? So it's like, help us help you. Almost like the Costco scenario, right? Is that you can get cheap stuff at Costco because you're a member. And now that they have, hundreds of millions of members or tens of millions of members, we can get the cheaper pricing. So same for us, same concept. Mm-hmm. So as we grow and have more leverage, have more audience, we can get things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for our members. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. And let's jump on the marketing side too, because you mentioned like the marketing benefits of the, sorry, I forget the name of the guitar maker.
Sure.
But the partnerships along those lines, right? Like, is it similar concept in the sense that it's like proof value for both parties? Obviously, it's incentive for your members, plus it's like good exposure for the partner.
It is, and you'll like our target market, and this is something that's worth sharing, whether it's for the business side or the consumers, is there's 75 million millennial and Gen Zs, we call them next gen consumers, in the US alone that have been to more than 6 live events in the past 12 months. On average, they spend $1,200 to $1,500 a year on tickets, hence why we chose $1,200 in the lifetime pass. Mm-hmm. But it's what their typical spend is. That same group of people travel 30 to 35 days a year, and they spend about $3,000 to $4,000 on hotels. So there's 75 million people already spending $5,000 a year on tickets and hotels, hence the product that we chose and the product we have. So it's a massive audience that are living an experiential life. So when you think about that group of people, they're a very highly an attractive group to target, especially for different brands. So for example, if you refer to Martin Guitar, they're an iconic guitar company. There's really only two, Fender and Martin are the two most iconic that ever existed. But as you might imagine, what happens over the years, their average age of their customer that buys a $5,000 guitar keeps getting older and older and older. So they would very much like the new people, the younger, the 20-somethings that are now learning how to play music, to think of Martin as the guitar to purchase rather than any of the others that are out there. So for them, it's about getting in front of a younger audience and being part of this community of people that love music. That's just one example, but it applies to pretty much all different groups of people that we might target for partnerships.
Yeah, definitely. And it's internal, right? Internal and cyclable. Right? Like it's you're talking about a business that's relevant to the consumers. It makes perfect sense. I'm going to widen the lens a little bit, and I want to chat about why, or if maybe first of all, building this current business, has felt any different than any other business that you've built.
Yeah, I would say the reason why I'm doing this is as an entrepreneur, my first e-commerce business was a consumer-driven business. And then I went into, you call it an agency-driven concept, more B2B, even though we touch consumers in the process. I didn't own or didn't create something that was the product that consumers were getting. And that's always fascinated me my whole life is I've always wanted to build a very large consumer business. And the first one, we sold it before it became very large. So I've always had this dream of, taking one more big swing at building a very large consumer business. So in that capacity, the why behind it feeds 20 plus years of entrepreneur desire, but also it feeds into who I am as a person. Like I've always loved live experiences. It's always been my thing. Like, I would go to anything where I was physically there. Like I go to baseball games, but I don't watch baseball on TV. I go to, an EDM show, but I don't always necessarily listen to EDM music personally on my stereo. So, but anyway, the point is that, anytime you're around other people sharing a passion, that's what drives me. And I know that's especially in a technology-driven world, like there's nothing more magical than people coming together. So if I can build a consumer brand that can reach millions of people globally in a way that brings people together, that's my dream.
Do you ever regret, not that, I mean, this is passion fueled plus it's your second swing at a consumer, but do you ever regret or think about what might have happened if you didn't sell your first one? Prematurely is the wrong word, but
It was premature, yeah. Yeah, I do. And funnily enough is that another company about 10 years later did the exact same model and raised over $100 million during COVID. You might have heard of it, Goldbelly.
It rings a bell.
Yeah, it's just out there, but it was funny. And my old founder always sends me texts, and he's like, damn it. He's like, just wrong time. But yeah, it was, I don't know. You ever see the movie Sliding Doors?
No, I haven't.
With Gwyneth Paltrow? I just watched it again last week for I hadn't seen it in 20 years, but it's the simple concept of life is every door you walk through could change the entire, trajectory of your entire life. And in her case, it was walking into the London subway, the tube, and she went one way and she met one guy, she met the other way, she met a different guy, and her whole life changed, and they showed both stories.
Yeah.
So the question is I don't know. Yeah. Could have been great. Maybe not ever even thought about FestivalPass. I often go back, because being an entrepreneur is a super rewarding path, but it's also pretty fucking hard, right? So hard from grinding, hard from, stress, hard from, raising capital, hoping you can get to the next piece, the next level. And it's brutal. And I always look back and I was like, well, shit, if I was an investment banker already making good money at 22 years old, 23 years old. And if I just stayed the track, I could easily be making tens of millions of dollars a year, as like at my age now, as a lead for one of the large investment banks, but I don't know if I'd be fulfilled. And, obviously there's even more money to be made in entrepreneurship, but there's also money to lose in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, 100%. I think two things come to mind there. Number one, butterfly effect. Have you seen that?
I have.
Yeah. So similar kind of concept, which is fascinating, right? And they can go back in time and check out all these different decisions that they would have made that changed the trajectory. Super awesome. And number two, I think to your second point there, entrepreneurs typically would start a business, at least, as far as I'm aware, for two reasons. Number one, passion. They want to work on something that they're super passionate about. Or number two, money driven, because they know that there is opportunity to make a lot of money. But typically the ones that go do it for that reason aren't the ones that exactly. But it sounds like from your story, everything that you've done to this point has actually set you up for this business that you're working on right now.
It is. And a lot of it is just sticking with it when it gets hard. Like, I mean, when I first came up with this idea, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, great. I'm going to build a business about live entertainment, but no way it can go out. But it's really just kind of sticking with it and pushing through. And then, every level we get to, there's the next reward, and then it gets hard again. Then there's a reward, and then it gets hard again.
Yeah. I'm curious about when you're planning a business, especially with the experience that you have, you think about as much as possible, right? You think about everything that you can, and you plan for all the different scenarios and the complications that will come up and arise and that sort of thing. But there's certain things that you can't, can't foresee. I'm curious about what some of those things might have been for you in building a business that you couldn't anticipate that might have happened.
Sure. I mean, to go back to some of the past businesses, I can tell you major life events for the world were hard. Like the reason we probably sold too early, the initial company, was because it was bordering on the internet 1.0 bubble. And I wasn't sure that if I kept the business in a year, we could fund it. So we had an opportunity. It was, a multi-$10 million exit at 25 years old. And I was like, let's do it. Like, because otherwise I have no idea. In hindsight, if I knew that Google and Facebook would come out like a year after and we'd be able to market it through search engine marketing, might have kept it and it would be a totally different trajectory. But anyway, we sold it. And because of it, then 9/11 happened, as I mentioned. We took all equity in the business that we sold. And unfortunately, that didn't pan out financially in a great way. After 9/11, the company that bought us chose about a year later to give their money back to their investors because they didn't know if they could sustain going forward. So we ended up getting, pennies on the dollar of our sale, which was very frustrating. I still to this day think I might go back and rebuy that domain and start it again just because it was fun. But anyway, so the point is that was two major life experiences or macroeconomic events that made it hard. The second was even when I had my agency. It was called Vincent Partners, is my last name, but we were doing extremely well. And that was from like 2001 to up till about 2008. And around 2008, there was, as you probably know, the biggest recession in world history since 1929. So when that all happened, people stopped spending marketing dollars. And when they stopped spending marketing dollars, I had a 70-person staff and everything was great. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, there's 2 clients that are leaving and, I don't know what next year's going to be. So we have to cut 10 people and we have to cut 5 people. And I mean, that was a miserable year or two where we just kept bringing the company down and down and down because to make sure we could survive. And it brought me to a place where I was like, well, okay, I want to get back into software because managing a service-based business where stuff can, the macroeconomics can take away, client revenue overnight, or at least within a few months, was very frustrating. So then hence why I decided I actually hired somebody to run that business, which eventually migrated into an email-driven business and actually did well for many years. But prior to that, then I decided I want to go into the B2B SaaS business. So anyway, it's just like macroeconomic events beyond my control, beyond anybody's control, definitely hurt different growth trajectories.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I mean, you've identified several of all of the biggest things that have happened in the past, 20 years that have affected one you in some or other way. Is there a way that you can kind of anticipate that something is going to happen that you don't know? You know what I mean? Like, how do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with just having building cash reserves, having the ability to withstand it, because at the end of the day, during catastrophe or during large incidents, cash is king, right? So it's as long as you can endure it. And you've seen this happen time and time again. All the Warren Buffett concepts and investments, his $5 billion investment in Goldman Sachs, like during the recession or whatever, turned into like 5x that. But it's those who can endure, can do it, and then they come out on top on the other side. So, the answer is just building something sustainable enough with enough cash reserves and enough core, underlying capacity so that you can endure whatever. Everything that happens like that, you come out of it. History will tell us that even during a recession, even during a depression, even during COVID, eventually there's another side to it, whether it's a year away, 2 years away, 3 years away. There's always cycles, and there's, I don't know, without getting too into different world orders or empires or anything like that, but Ray Dalio has a great book out now talking about the rise and fall of empires, and there's approximately 75-year large debt cycle versus micro 8 and 10-year mini debt cycles, and we're kind of moving in on one of those large 75-year shifts. So in that, there's always a massive restructuring of not only the economy, but who has the central reserve currency in the world and all the things that go with it. But that's probably for another podcast.
Yeah, potentially. But I do want to touch on that. I think, I mean, extrapolate a little bit, but I think it's so important that, you know, as founders, as CEOs, whatever the case may be, that we're obviously in touch with our business, but also, like, to your point, knowing, being educated on these other external factors as much as possible.
Sure.
How important is education to you as a founder outside of your immediate business?
Sure. Very important. And the form of education is, different, right? I'm not saying everybody needs a Ivy League degree. I mean, that's not even what does it, or even an MBA. I could care less about. For me, it's the ability to learn from other peers, and obviously, whether it's books or the internet in general. Like, so what's been best for me is, for the last 18 years or so, I've been part of an entrepreneur organization, EO, which is, I know we talked about earlier, but through that, I've learned so much, whether it was just from my own peer forum, or, I even did a 3-year program at MIT, which is the Entrepreneur Master's Program, and that was amazing. And having the opportunity to be around other peers to learn has always been the best. And even now I'm part of something called the Post-Exit Founders Group, which is another global organization. And there's 300 of us here in Austin that all people have sold businesses. And the amount of mind share that I get from those folks and the learning I get from them is just tremendous.
Surrounding yourself with like-minded people, right? I think, I mean, having those tough conversations with people that get it, right? We chatted about this again off camera, but just the amount of conversations that you can't have with people that don't get it because they just haven't been there or done that thing or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and the same way I want to build community with FestivalPass around interests, like I love this band, or I love this sports team, or I love this comedy. I want this, I get the same out of entrepreneurship. So it's like when I'm able to actually sit with another entrepreneur, it's like we can talk for hours and hours and hours and never be bored. Whereas, to your point, is when you're with people that are not your people, it can get boring.
Yeah. Do you think there's there's what we call, kind of in quotations, book smart, right? Like you went to school for business or whatever the case, and you studied all this. You spent 4 years or more studying how to become an entrepreneur, how to make decisions, or whatever the case. And then there's the experience and insight that you get, and anticipation, and all these different things from actually doing it. If you were to touch on maybe what the difference might be, because you've seen both, what have you learned from actual practical experience versus what you couldn't have learned from a book?
Sure. I think part of it is you just have to do it. You just have to jump in, because it's everything's moving. It's all iterative. So it's like the next opportunity that you didn't even know would happen wouldn't have happened if you weren't already doing it. So it's kind of, there's an old Chinese proverb about you can't get onto the new horse if you're not riding on the other horse, or something of that nature. It's probably a better way to say it, but it's like you just got to be moving, because of being in the game, opportunities will come about. And I think the bigger thing too is the one thing that I think makes people succeed versus not in entrepreneurship is it's truly is perseverance. It's there. Every founder I know that's been successful has had 100 times where they're about to go out of business. The 100 times where there's a pain that they didn't know how to fix, and somehow, somewhere, they just got through that piece, and the world didn't fall. And then it got them to the next level, which got them to the next level, which got them to the next level. And every entrepreneur that will tell you that exact same story, even after they sold their business for $100 million.
Often, the $100 million exit is right around the corner from, I can't make payroll, right?
Yep,
So, yeah,
exactly.
wild. How do you deal with those pressures? I'm sure you've experienced them well in all of your companies. That I suppose, do you feel that all the decisions that you're making are kind of affecting those around you, your staff, your clients, et cetera, and how do you deal with those pressures that you are the one making those decisions, and ultimately everything is kind of on your shoulders?
Yeah, I mean, by now I've done it enough where it's kind of like it just is what it is. But when you talk about dealing with pressure, is just try to stay generally healthy. Like I make sure I go to the gym a few times or more a week, and like that's my time to actually enjoy it, right? It's my time to I never thought I'd take classes like at gyms because it never was a class guy until I took a class, and I was like, oh shit.
Until ClassPass.
Yeah, I didn't use ClassPass. It's just lifetime gym here. But for an hour, I don't think about anything. And it's like finally, like I'm just following an instructor. Somebody took away all the pressures of the world for an hour, and then afterwards I feel refreshed. I'm like, okay, now I can conquer something. And then sleep, just like everything else, right? Is like as long as I prioritize sleep, work out, and just feel mentally healthy and stable. Everything else is kind of just issues that need to be dealt with. And also, I just realized too is like we as humans all will look at the worst case scenario of every problem. And 90% of the time, the worst case scenario does not come to fruition. Yeah. So that level of stress, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stress, but I usually go to bed at night and I tell myself that I've done everything I can possibly do today to solve this problem. So I'm going to sleep and I'll wake up tomorrow refreshed and I'll try again. Like meaning that like, I'm not going to think about this problem all night because it just, I'm not going to solve it in the middle of the night. So.
That's probably like the way that you handle these things is obviously driven by experience, right? Like I think a first-time entrepreneur, early entrepreneur might be like, spending all night thinking about this thing that they know that realistically we know that we can't control and it might not be up to us, right? So
I agree.
We parked the idea of AI and the kind of the tech that you're using, and I'd like to revisit that. What kind of tech are you using? Obviously, we talked about blockchain, but AI specifically, it's one of those things that a lot of people are, I guess, afraid of or just unsure about and that sort of thing. So how are you using AI and likened tech in your business?
Yeah, so as we speak right now, we're currently building a pretty unique, call it AI agentic infrastructure, both to create consumer-driven value, but also operational value. So it's actually something which is, we're leveraging AWS and they're even funding a part of it in order to build it out. But I'll give you two examples, one consumer and one operational. So you can see, and with an agentic infrastructure, we'll deploy dozens of agents to handle different things, which will continue to make us more operationally efficient, while at the same time offering new things for our users, our members. But the two things on the member side is it's about building kind of a concierge service for a member so that they can do really cool things. Like the first thing is just recommendations of like, hey, I know because I mentioned before we have data on the member that you told me what you like. I know where you've been. I know what tickets you've bought. I know who you're connected to on the platform and what they have bought and what they do. There's a social graph to truly understand like who you are. So one of the cool things about AI is that you can end up allowing the consumer on multiple touch points to be able to tap into that data and an LLM to really kind of build a graph of what is something you would like to do. So I use this example every once in a while, and because there's a couple other adjacent technologies that have nothing to do with entertainment or anything like that, where I see something working, where you could call on a phone and you get a response because they're tapping into your data, your graph, and everything about you. You could use WhatsApp and ask a question. And again, it's tapping into the same data infrastructure, the same LLM, all repeating back information. So for example, the use case that I'll often use to explain to people is like, let's say I'm here in Austin and I'm a member of FestivalPass. And let's say I'm walking around Lady Bird Lake or going for a run or at the gym, and I decide I'm just gonna call FestivalPass. And I just tap a number, call FestivalPass and say, hey, FestivalPass, I'm interested in some kind of music show this weekend. What do you got for me? And then FestivalPass will immediately say, oh, hey, it's Ed calling. Interesting. Okay, Ed likes these artists. Ed lives in Austin, Texas. Ed has been to this shows before, all in microseconds, right? Ed's connected to these people that like these shows and blah, 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 blah. And then I'll come back within microseconds and be like, well, hey, Ed, and this is the AI voice talking. Hey, Ed, I see that you like, Chris Stapleton. He's playing at the Moody Center on Saturday at 8. I see some tickets in the 100 section for about 150 credits. Would you like me to grab two for you? Oh, yeah, that sounds great. Oh, by the way, I see you're connected to about 100 other people that also like Chris Stapleton. Do you have somebody to go with, or would you like me to ping one of them and see if they want to go to the show with you? And that kind of concierge service can easily, not easily is the wrong word, can definitely be done with AI because we have the LLM, we have the data, and we have the ability to communicate that with you. And that same interaction could happen on WhatsApp or text.
Yeah. Huge, huge. Is there anybody doing something similar, first of all? Well, let's start there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing eventually over time, I'm not the first person that wants a really unique engaging experience for the consumer. But I think we're one of the few doing it in entertainment right now and to live events. We'll see if we can get ahead of everybody.
Have you thought about the fact that, if this technology doesn't exist and you are currently developing it, could you license it to other businesses?
Absolutely, we can. Yeah, and there's always the balance, right? There's an example of another EO member here in town. I don't want to speak for them, but it's a men's clothing business, and it was like a $50-100 million clothing business making men's shorts or whatever. And they found out afterwards the underlying operating system that they were using to fulfill their own shorts was worth more than the clothing business. So they ended up selling that to all other e-commerce providers and turned it into a multi-$100 million company. So the answer is sure. If we find some magic in some of the things we're building, could we sell it to others? Sure, but it's as an entrepreneur, it's you can't chase every shiny nickel.
Totally. It sounds like you've got a lot going on, both you're touching on so many different avenues, obviously, selling the memberships, making the partnerships, creating this great experience for your community, working on the AI side of things, all these different things. What's kind of the immediate focus in let's call it the next year?
Yeah, it's very clear and simple. It's sell all of our lifetime passes. And by doing so, we begin to drive the community. We begin to get people excited to more and more use our platform. And it also allows us to really roll out more and more benefits. And as we do that, it just feeds itself. So it's kind of like it's a very linear approach. In the next 6 to 12 months, we want to make sure we sell every single lifetime pass at a reasonable price that works both for the members and works for us. One, it provides us, the cushion of capital, not to have to keep going out to venture capitalists to get more and more money to build our vision, while at the same time provides benefits for everybody. So it's like, once we do that, we can then begin to truly launch all the other pieces of our business. And of course, we're doing it all simultaneously.
Right.
But that's the magic. If we sell those, then we're never going to fail.
Where can we send people to follow along? Your journey plus FestivalPass.
Yeah, so obviously festivalpass.com is where all the magic happens. Get FestivalPass is our socials. So, get FestivalPass on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, X, etc. And then, me personally is LinkedIn. I don't have a big personal Instagram or anything like that. It's usually through the business. But that's kind of the path to follow. And the one thing I did share with you is earlier is that people are going to start seeing a lot more of us across, specifically Instagram, but a lot of other kind of social media where, we have some unique partnerships with some news, culture, meme sites out there that are really going to start talking about FestivalPass and kind of try to make it a cultural aspect of this next generation.
Yeah, let's talk about that further. That this marketing strategy that you're rolling out. Obviously, as you mentioned, your goal in the next year is to sell all these memberships. How are you going about doing that? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, as I mentioned, there's this partnership that we're working through on the kind of media side, and part of it is we want to build trust and have a natural understanding of what we are as a company. Of course, there's kind of direct paid media where we can do an ad and drive people directly to the site and tell them about the benefits and features of FestivalPass, and especially the lifetime pass, which we will do. And the good news is that the messaging of a lifetime pass is so different than the messaging to say buy a ticket for the show that we actually get amazing metrics on the paid media. So we can get a new free user on our platform for about $2.50, which typically costs a lot more than that for other things, because most of the messaging is, hey, did you know you can pay once and go to live events for free for the rest of your life or whatever? And that's curious. People want to know, okay, well, tell me more, right? So they come to the site, then they sign up for free, then they go to our checkout page where they actually learn about the lifetime pass, they watch videos, and so what's great is that it's highly engaging and it's a great message, which is a great differentiator. But the reality is we also want to build trust for people to believe who we are as an overall business. So in order to do that, we're really building more of an organic marketing approach outside of the direct marketing, which I mentioned. And part of it is partnering with kind of some of the folks that really create the culture of the internet, where there are news and meme and sites like that. So, there's a couple pages and handles out there that I can share, but people will see it. So it's kind of things like, hey, I was depressed all last year, but I got my FestivalPass and now I'm seeing Creed front row kind of thing. It's like this whole idea that, it can be life-changing in a way. Things like, hey, I was looking for the best hacks for the best way to, enjoy experiences. One was, do I go skiing in Vail where it costs $200 for a lift ticket, or do I go to Bulgaria where it's $30 lift ticket? Next slide. I found FestivalPass where I paid once and now I get $1,200 a year of tickets. So it's about kind of infusing it to the organic side of what people do, so that when they see us and they hear about us, they start understanding and believing rather than it being just an ad. Hey, come by.
How hands-on are you with the creative? Like you were giving ad examples and that sort of thing. Is that something that you have a team for, or do you get involved?
Well, specifically with this organic approach, the folks we partner with that have built 260 million followers on Instagram, they know how to do this. So I'm totally hands off. And part of the agreement in the partnership was you guys do it. You figure it out. And they're super excited because they love, they built that following because they're really creative and they're really great at creating really funny memes and things like that. So zero, I'm not creative. Of course, they show most of the creative to me and I can say no if something looks totally bad, but I have not seen one yet that I would say no to. But then on the other stuff, obviously I'm a data guy. So when it comes down to pure direct media, it's like, run these 10 creatives and whichever one does the best stays, the other 9 go away. It's just very, very data driven.
Yeah. And on the trust side, I think, we touched over that earlier as well, but I'm curious, I guess, when you're building trust with somebody and, you're asking them to spend $3,000 at the current time of recording, what does that trust level look like? And specifically, maybe a jump off point might be, have you experienced anybody that has bought a month worth of credits as an example, just to see if it makes sense for them before buying a pass?
Yes. Yeah, so that does happen. So while our kind of core messaging is around the lifetime pass for the many reasons I shared earlier, we have seen them. Of course, anybody can buy a monthly or an annual pass right now, but I have seen people coming in from the lifetime creative and they're like, okay, well, I'll do a $49 a month plan and go to a show to make sure I actually get a valid ticket, to make sure this is for real, right? And we have testimonials on the site, we have video testimonials, and they're all real. They're actually members. Like most people don't believe it. Like they'll see testimonials are weird because people sometimes are like, well, how do I know that's really a person or whatever? But the truth is, these are actual members who actually paid for it, and they're actually excited to tell people that it actually works. So the answer is yes, people do buy either a monthly or even an annual pass to try it out before they drop the $3,000.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. We talked about this earlier as well, but the whole idea that this is kind of a new model, that you're proving the model and you're proving the product, right? Like for people that didn't, get pass, what was it? ClassPass and that sort of thing. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and lucky that came where people understand it. There's 5+ million ClassPass members. So effectively, people at least know how it works. There's at least 5 million people out there that understand the credit-based currency model.
Yeah. And this has been awesome. Thank you for coming by today. Thank you for this conversation and shedding light on both entrepreneurship and the business. It's been incredible.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Happy to be here.